On the run from her jealous stepmother, a princess befriends 7 short men. Join us as we chat about telling a woman she's the fairest of them all, the huntsman that gets away with not murdering, and the importance of hygiene. Heigh-ho, heigh-ho, it's off to work we go, as we find out if Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs stands the test of time.
Test of time, James and Alan have to say, do the movies you love still hold up today? James says gladiator with a glut, Alan says as a father blah blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have to say, do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have to say, do the movies you love still hold up today?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Test of Time. I'm James Brief, and someday my podcast Prince partner will come. Oh my God, there he is, my perfect Prince podcast partner, Alan Noah. How are you, Al?
Hi, I am doing very well. I'm very flattered that I am your perfect Prince partner.
Podcast Prince partner.
Perfect podcast Prince partner. Got it. Alan always adores alliterations. Well, thank you very much for that. Yeah, we are going to be talking about the first Disney movie because there's another live action remake because that's what Disney does now. And we haven't done a ton of the old Disney movies on the podcast. We did Pinocchio, Dumbo, Cinderella. I think that's about it for like the old ones, right?
I mean, it depends what you consider old. Are you talking about before Jeffrey Katzenberg, like pre-Little Mermaid?
I mean, I'm talking like 30s, 40s, 50s.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we've hit on a few of the classics and not some of the others. This is the one that really made the Disney empire. I mean, before this, they were on thin ice, and Walt Disney had to mortgage his home to make this film. Yeah, everything was riding on this.
Yeah.
If nothing else, this film really is a landmark in the history of film. Because without this, you don't have the history of Walt Disney. But what was your favorite of those the early ones? Pre-Katzenberg, pre-Little Mermaid?
I think when I think of old Disney movies, in my head, I think 30s, 40s, 50s. I get what you're saying, that the Disney Renaissance, that was a new era, but I didn't really watch a lot of those movies a ton as a kid. Maybe Peter Pan, I saw a handful of times. That's from 53. The princess ones, Snow White, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty. I hate to say it, but I feel like as a little boy, I just wasn't into those movies. When I got into the Disney movies was The Little Mermaid and Aladdin, just because of my age, and that was when those movies hit. I know that some people had those old clamshell VHS tapes, or, they recorded movies off of TV and they would just watch 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea over and over and over again. But yeah, it just wasn't that big of a thing for me, really. Why? Were you into the older ones?
Well, first, I hated all those live-action Disney films from like the 70s and 60s, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and Bedknobs and Broomsticks, and I don't know, did they make Swiss Family Robinson? Maybe they did.
Yes, yeah. But Bedknobs and Broomsticks was half live-action, half animation, right?
But it's a live-action with animation in it. You don't think of it as a cartoon with live people joining it.
Okay.
Until Roger Rabbit, that didn't work for me. There were definitely a few of them that we had on VHS, and not the clamshell ones. That was my little sister had that collection. There were about 4 that we used to watch like over and over, and that was Dumbo, Pinocchio, The Sword and the Stone, and Robin Hood. Yeah, those were probably a little more boy-centric as opposed to the the Cinderella type. But today we're going back to where it began. And if you haven't seen this film, or, if you're confusing it with any of the other early films about a damsel in distress, this movie is about Snow White, obviously. She's a princess whose stepmother, the evil queen, worries that Snow White's beauty will surpass her own. When that day comes, the queen orders a huntsman to take Snow White into the forest and kill her. But he can't bring himself to do it. Instead, the hunter urges her to flee and hide. Snow White stumbles upon a tiny cottage belonging to 7 dwarfs. Doc, grumpy, happy, sleepy, bashful, sneezy, and of course, dopey. And the dwarfs take her in. Despite their efforts to hide her, the queen discovers that Snow White is still alive and uses magic to disguise herself as an old lady. She tricks Snow White into eating a poisoned apple, which puts her in a deep sleep that only can be broken by love's first kiss.
Aww.
The dwarfs, believing she is dead, place her in a glass coffin. Eventually, a prince who has fallen in love with Snow White finds her and awakens her with a kiss.
So I'm not going to ask you if this movie was a hit, because of course it was. This was known as Disney's folly because no one believed in Walt Disney's vision that people would go to see a feature-length animated movie. But of course he was right, and the entire Disney company that we know today exists because this movie was a smash hit. So I don't know, just give me some impressive numbers.
From a $1.5 million budget, the original launch of Snow White grossed $66 million worldwide when it launched on December 21st, 1937. And then it had a lot of reissues in 1983, 1987, 1993, and all of those re-releases made $30 to $46 million. So that threw another $115 or so million in there. It was actually the number one grossing film of 1938. Yeah, incredibly successful.
Of course. And Wizard of Oz was 1939. And The Wizard of Oz was very much inspired by Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It was a fantasy story and, a female protagonist going on an adventure. And one of the dwarves, I forget which one, when he talks, it sounds just exactly like the Cowardly Lion. When The Wizard of Oz was released, one of the taglines, or a critic or someone said, it's like Snow White, but in real life. It was definitely capitalizing off of the popularity of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
You're seeing a full color animated feature, and that is a big deal. And, of course, animation, you can have all the quote unquote special effects you want because you can have any camera angle you want and things you just couldn't do in live action. So this film was just a phenomenon. Everyone wants to see this leap in motion picture technology, and it's made differently than films would say today. Snow White walks through the forest for several minutes of you just see creatures going in and out of waterfalls and popping out of holes, and Dopey is going up the stairs to try to see what they think is a ghost and turns out to be Snow White. It takes a long time, I think, by modern standards, and I feel like they're really kind of testing out things that they could do. The background is static, but just like Dopey's moving, that's kind of the limit of what they could do.
I think it's important to remember that they were pushing the limits of what they could do.
Exactly.
And movies were still relatively new, and animation was still relatively new. Disney was pioneering in animation just in general, even with the shorts. And, the shorts were their bread and butter before Snow White. Disney wanted to push the envelope further and make a feature. This required new kinds of animation, and the animators had to learn new techniques and how they move the cameras. And they were really trying to do things that not just were brand new for the sake of being new, but to kind of justify making a feature-length movie. The story goes that people had told Walt Disney that no one would sit for a feature-length cartoon. The shorts were fine, but feature-length, an hour and a half, that's too much color. It's going to hurt people's eyes. People don't want to see a cartoon for that long. But then he saw that there was one theater that was showing back-to-back shorts, and it was basically like an hour and a half long. And he said, I think people do have the attention span, but he wanted to tell a story that was not just worthy of that longer runtime, but also you want to put some cool visual stuff in there. I hear what you're saying. There are parts of this movie that it is just kind of showing off in a way. And I don't mean that in a negative way of, hey, look at me, look at what we can do. I sort of interpret it as Walt Disney saying, look at what we can do. We can do some really cool stuff here. He's proud. I feel like he's proud of the animators. I mean, the movie starts with an acknowledgement of thanking all of the people who worked on the movie. that's kind of not the sentiment you think of for Hollywood, like the big studio executive thanking all of the people who work so hard on the movie. But in a situation like this, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it does make perfect sense. And I agree that Walt Disney is trying to show off, like, yeah, folks, we're in the next level. I think it was perfectly appropriate for Disney to be kind of an ambassador of what you can do with film.
Exactly. And one of the most famous parts of this movie is the evil queen asking who's the fairest of them all. And just from a test of time perspective, I think that as a phrase does not stand the test of time. I get it. I understand what she's asking by who's the fairest of them all. She means who's the most beautiful. But I am quite sure that if I was out to dinner with Courtney and I said, sweetheart, I just want you to know you are the fairest one in this entire restaurant, she'd say, what? What the hell are you talking about? Like, that's just not a thing people say now.
True, except for your wife. She'd probably think you're doing some bit.
Yeah, probably.
I think it's interesting. She was probably, or certainly as the Magic Mirror tells her, for years and years, and as a young woman, the most beautiful woman that existed in all the land. And beauty eventually fades. And there's a point where every one of us look in the mirror and we see a gray hair, or we see something that's not what it used to be, or whether it's a wrinkle or anything. It's nature. And I just find the idea of that intriguing.
There is a fear about, getting older, becoming less attractive. That is kind of the entire point of the Oscar-nominated movie The Substance from last year, which was very good. But it just all feels really out of the blue. And I am very, very, very confident that in the new live action movie, there will be some backstory. What happened to Snow White's mother? Probably we'll find out. We'll definitely find out what happened to her father. And why is the evil queen so obsessed with being beautiful and more beautiful than Snow White? Why does she consider it a threat? There has to be some more to the story. I mean, look, this is based on a Brothers Grimm fairy tale. I did read those fairy tales a trillion years ago, like back in middle school or something. I genuinely don't remember much. But I think that in a kind of simple fairy tale, it can just be she's jealous of the younger, prettier one. And that's all you need.
Right.
I do think modern audiences will want more. And I'm sure that the live action will give you just motivation, pure motivation for these characters.
This has to be one of the weakest love stories I've ever seen in film.
Oh, yeah.
Where the entire climax depends on love's first kiss. I mean, this prince guy that's in love with Snow White, I have no idea why he likes her. I mean, he probably thinks you're hot. Snow White is, not my type, but, I guess in the 30s, that's the Betty Boop look or something.
No, she's not Betty Boop. Like the initial animators made Snow White look more like Betty Boop, and Walt Disney did not like that. Way too curvy. That was not the look he was going for. So they revised the style to be less like Betty Boop.
Okay. But the prince, that story is just awful. A flaw of this film is literally just the damsel in distress. And I don't mind that guy saves her. I mean, that's perfectly fine. There could be a hero in the film. But this guy comes out of nowhere and he's the hero. Like, give us a little bit to this love's first kiss.
Well, they do meet early in the movie.
I know, but I'm just saying it's not enough. Like, you literally met through one song, then you're in love. I thought that was one of the weaker parts of the film.
You're absolutely right. The love story is super, super thin. I mean, you could say that about the plot of the entire movie, quite frankly. Also, apparently, Snow White is supposed to be 14. I don't remember them saying that in the movie. That makes it creepier. But yeah, I mean, he sees her. They quote unquote fall in love because he hears her singing and he thinks she's beautiful. He's gone for most of the movie apparently in the original script, in the original idea of the movie, there was going to be more with the prince. He was going to be looking for her, and the evil queen was going to trap him, and he was going to be in the dungeon, and she was going to kind of torture him by like making all of these skeletons come to life, and the skeletons were going to dance and horrify him. Walt Disney cut a lot of that out because in part, I think he just felt like the prince wasn't an interesting character, and maybe there was something about the sound or the animation. But yeah, he's gone. And when he shows up at the end, the title cards that were in the very beginning of the movie that kind of set it up, they come back pretty much at the very end, like 98% of the way through the movie. And they say Snow White has been in this death-like slumber. They couldn't bury her because she was so beautiful, so they put her in this glass coffin, and the prince had been looking for her, and then one day he finds her. And it's like, wait, hold on. What? Like, his story is basically an afterthought. It is yada yada'd away with this text on screen. Again, yeah, in the live action, they will definitely flesh that out. There is no character named the prince in the new live action. The male lead is just called Jonathan. I don't know if he is a prince or whatever, but he's not Prince Jonathan.
Right.
And Rachel Zegler has said that it's not really about the romance.
Well, one thing I'll say about the prince, he's not 14. I mean, that makes this a lot creepier.
And let's talk about that thing that I think people do talk about now, which is that he kisses her without consent. And look, I'm all about emphasizing consent, and that's a wonderful thing. But the kiss at the end of the movie didn't really read as super creepy to me. It's not even really positioned that she's asleep. Like, the evil queen calls it the sleep of death or death sleep or something like that. And for us, the audience, we know that she's not truly dead, but the Seven Dwarfs consider her dead. The only reason they didn't bury her is because she's just too beautiful. So it's not like he's kissing her while he thinks she's asleep. He's giving her just a kiss because he thinks she's dead, which is also super weird and strange, don't get me wrong. But I don't know, it didn't really seem like that predatory to me.
I've never been to an open casket funeral, but I could see people kissing Grandpa on the cheek one more time or something. I could see that at least.
Exactly. I kind of got more of that vibe. And I don't really remember Sleeping Beauty, just based on the title of that. Yeah, maybe it's more well known that she's asleep. So maybe that prince giving her a kiss while she's asleep, maybe that one's creepier.
I don't remember much of that film, except there is a dragon in that film. And I remember being surprised. I'm like, a fire-breathing dragon? Well, this is kind of unexpected.
Right. I could just picture that one maybe being more quote-unquote problematic. I mean, it's also a little bit weird that there are multiple movies where the prince has to kiss the princess who's asleep to save her. It's kind of a weird thing to do twice.
Yeah, I mean, there's also a thing where basically in a Disney movie, the parents are dead, or at least one parent is dead.
Yeah.
But you know who I thought was one of the coolest characters in this film that I completely forgot about? The huntsman. That guy's awesome. Yeah. At first he follows the orders. He's probably killed for her before. I mean, that seems to be implied, I guess. And he's also a huntsman, so he doesn't really have a problem killing. But he can't kill Snow White because he realizes, he can't kill an innocent girl. Maybe it's because she's so beautiful. Oh, and the princess, yeah. But he slices up a pig and puts a pig heart there. And I'm thinking, if this was Game of Thrones and this was Cersei, once Cersei realizes, or the queen realizes that she's been had, the first thing that a Cersei-like queen is going to do is tear him limb from limb slowly.
I had that same thought, like, how does he get away with it? I think the real answer is that they just didn't want to animate it, or it was going to be too much. You do see a skeleton in the evil queen's dungeon, so maybe that is the huntsman. She did some horrible thing to him and turned him into a skeleton. Well, probably not, though, because it looks like he's reaching for a thing of water, and then she kind of laughs at the skeleton, so he probably wouldn't have died of thirst and turned into a skeleton that quickly. Maybe there was some magic in there.
But I have a question, speaking of magic.
Yeah.
Wouldn't a poisoned apple that kills you be more effective than a poisoned apple that not only has a chance of being cured, but if it does, it's going to cause true love. I guess it's kind of implied that she knows there's always an antidote to everything. Like she kind of looks up like, what is the antidote to this one? And because it says love's true kiss, she's like, oh, that's never going to happen. But like, why can't she just kill her? I'm just wondering, like, why not?
It's a fair question. I guess the answer would be that she doesn't want to get her hands dirty. She tells the huntsman to cut out her heart, but if the huntsman's not going to do that and she's going to take matters into her own hands, she knows magic. She's going to do a magic thing as opposed to stab her with the dagger. There's some irony in what she does because she's so obsessed with being the most beautiful. And then what does she do? She turns herself into this ugly old witch, and she's in that form when she dies. You know, so she makes herself so ugly in order to make herself be the most beautiful forever, when that was stupid. She didn't have to do that.
You know what I was surprised at in this film? I was really bracing for a lot of really cringy things about the Seven Dwarfs.
Okay.
And Snow White, when she first happens upon the cottage, she does think maybe perhaps there's children that live there because of some of the sizes of like maybe the clothes or the bed that she sees. But other than that, I feel like the Seven Dwarfs are really portrayed more as generally bachelors, like men that don't have a woman in their life. And then they each have their little thing, dopey and sneezy and bashful. But I almost was surprised that they didn't have to even be dwarves. Like it really had almost nothing to do with it. I mean, except that they had small beds, but it could have just been seven guys that live in a cabin that are just, you know, they're miners and that's just what they do. And miners being, you know, they have pickaxes in a mine.
You don't mean it in the Kendrick Lamar way? A miner.
Right.
I'm not 100% sure about this, but I don't think they say the word dwarfs in the movie. Snow White refers to them as little men. And yeah, you're right. The fact that they're short of stature doesn't really play a role. So why are they dwarves? I think the answer is because they were in the Brothers Grimm fairy tale, in which they did not have names. They are just seven dwarfs. And Walt Disney wanted to name them. I put together a little list. Would you like to hear some of the other names that Walt Disney considered for the Seven Dwarfs?
Absolutely.
Okay, here's what I got. Awful, Baldy, Biggie Wiggy, Big O Ego, Blabby, Burpy, Deafy. Ugh, don't like that one. Dirty, Dizzy, Gabby, Gaspy, Gloomy, Hickey, Hoppy Jumpy, Hotsy, Jaunty, Jumpy, Nifty, Shifty, Shorty, Sneezy Wheezy, Sniffy, Stuffy, and Tubby.
Those are mostly awful.
Yeah.
I always, while I thought that Dopey was like the cutest one and like, you know, he was fun, I don't really like his name. I don't like that they call him Dopey. He's actually not particularly stupid.
Right.
He's just like, I mean, he doesn't talk. He's mute. I don't think Deafy would have been good. I think Dopey's better than that. But some of those are just awful.
They are indeed. Dopey is so cute. I have to mention it because my mom does listen to the podcast. Dopey is her favorite. When we went to Disney World, we went out of our way to go to this restaurant that was like on the other side of the park. And I made reservations there solely because that was the only place where you could meet Dopey and do like a meet and greet and get a picture with Dopey. And she was so excited and it was really adorable. And the whole thing was Snow White themed. And we have pictures with, the evil queen, who is really funny. I also have great pictures of my stepdad with Grumpy. That was a really fun meal. But yeah, I mean, the dwarves are adorable. And sorry to keep jumping to the new movie, but at one point, apparently, they said that they weren't going to have dwarf characters in the new one at all. Then it turned out that no, they're just going to be CGI instead of actors, which is kind of weird, and Peter Dinklage was mad about it, and I don't know that there's like a clear good way to do it, but they look a little weird. I mean, I know you don't watch trailers, but in the trailer, you kind of look at them and you're like, oh, well, huh. In the new one, I think they are more magical creatures as opposed to just humans with dwarfism. Like these are German mystical forest creatures of some kind, I guess.
Okay. They're definitely walking on eggshells. They don't want to portray these in any negative light. It's not going to be mini me.
Right.
But it will be interesting to see where they go with it.
Also, by the way, Grumpy is terrible. I think I had maybe kind of remembered him as just being sort of more like his name and, kind of just grumpy. But he hates all women. I mean, when he says all females is poison, they're full of wicked wiles. And then Bashful says, what are wicked wiles? And he says, I don't know, but I'm gonna get them. Like, it's funny, but it's like, wow, I was not expecting so much sexism in this movie. There you go.
I think what they were going for is this whole, like, we're men and we're bachelors and we like living dirty and we don't need this. And then, oh no, look at this, like, this symbiosis we can have where you guys protect me and I can make this home really nice. But back then it wasn't good either. But I think that's what they were going for more.
The whole thing about Snow White keeping the house clean, she sort of volunteers that. She finds the house and she immediately says, I'll clean it up, which isn't necessarily just because she's female. It's also because the evil queen has made her a scullery maid. So that's all she does in the castle.
That's established early on.
Exactly. So this is what she does. She cleans. And a lot of this movie is kind of about hygiene in a really weird way where, she tells the dwarfs that they have to clean up before supper. And that really pisses off Grumpy. What do you mean wash up? And there's a whole song about washing your hands before you eat.
Well, it's funny you bring that up, Al, because today it's like, what the hell's wrong with you? Like, of course you have to wash up. Hygiene and all this stuff about brushing your teeth, this is a brand new thing. So I think there needed to be a lot of PSAs for people back then about, like, you should wash your hands before you eat. And unfortunately, it doesn't age well because I think everyone knows to wash their hands today. But in the 1930s, I think there might be people that needed to hear the lesson. Yeah, it not just like when your hands are literally full of dirt. You should just always wash your hands before you handle food with your hands.
That's really interesting. But in the 1930s, did they also not know about animals carrying diseases? Because Snow White is doing a lot of cooking and baking with the animals jumping on the food and the birds and the pie and all that.
Yeah, I mean, they learned this in the medical school in Hungary, but, this stuff takes a while to spread.
My point is just that, yeah, these birds are adorable, but what with all the talk about bird flu, I was like, I wouldn't want these birds on my pies.
Snow White is the reason that eggs are so expensive.
How?
Because she made it seem adorable to put all of the animals all over your food. So that's probably what someone did with the egg farms. I think that's the best guess.
No, that's terrible.
So, Alan, let me ask you, does 1937 Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs stand the test of time?
Yes, of course it does. This movie is beautiful. It is iconic in pop culture. Everybody knows Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Maybe not everyone can name all seven, but you've heard of them. You know the story. You know the thing about the poison apple and the mirror on the wall. A lot of people think it's mirror, mirror on the wall, but that isn't the line. I think that's like a Mandela effect kind of thing. But whatever. Yes, there's a new one coming out now, but before that, even if they weren't doing a live action remake, these characters have endured partly because of the Brothers Grimm fairy tale, but also really because of this movie. I definitely thought that Snow White and the Huntsman movie that came out years ago was a Disney thing, and it's not. It's just more based on the Brothers Grimm. I just remember that wrong.
Do you remember what other Snow White film came out at the same time, inspired? And it's just funny because of what you brought up there. It was a Julia Roberts film. Yeah, as you said, that's wrong. It would be like releasing a Star Wars parody called Luke, I Am Your Father, which of course is never said in The Empire Strikes Back.
Right. So, I mean, even though you can do other Snow White stories that are based on the Brothers Grimm fairy tale, this is still the version of Snow White in pop culture. This is the definitive telling of that story. I mentioned meeting some of the characters at Disney World. There's the ride, Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. There was also the 7D, which was a TV show that Eli used to love when he was young, that was on Disney XD before Disney Plus, which was like a modern reimagining of the Seven Dwarfs. But really the thing about this movie that doesn't stand the test of time the most is, I think, just the story. The plot is so paper thin. Very, very, very little to it. And Disney just does these live action remakes. That's what they do now. But I can sort of see that doing a remake of this movie could be appealing for a screenwriter because there's a lot of room to work, like there's a lot of things you can flesh out. There's a whole world you can build out around these characters. And I would think that would be kind of fun for a screenwriter to do, to really take this kind of bare bones story and really flesh it out. And also just because of what this movie created, all of Disney. Walt Disney used the profits from this movie to build Walt Disney Studios, which still exists in that exact same location. Everything we know about Walt Disney, the movies, the theme parks, everything came from the success of this movie. And that's not why this movie stands the test of time. But yeah, I think the movie definitely stands the test of time. What about you, James? What do you think?
This film is definitely dated. There's a lot of animation sequences that are a little bit, it's not boring, but it's a little too repetitive for me. Okay. I think that the love story, as you said, is completely paper thin. I really like some of these characters. I would put Snow White as my least favorite or least interesting character in the film. I love the huntsman. I think the queen is great. The dwarves are good. I guess the prince is the worst. I'd forgotten a lot of these songs.
A lot of them are forgettable.
But they're still wonderful. Like they're really nice. Like, Heigh-ho, Heigh-ho, it's off to work we go. Someday my prince will come is, the words are a little cringy and, maybe a bad lesson to girls. But, a metaphor, not actually a prince.
Okay.
The animation sequences, some of them are really, really good to this day. I think that the queen's transformation into the ugly old lady, I think is really cool. It's kind of a reverse of Beauty and the Beast when he goes from the beast into a very handsome man. I think the animation's great there. And she gets very wrinkly and older. And she's even kind of grossed out about looking at herself because she does a really good job there. So I think there's a lot in the film that really holds up. I think there's also, I think you said it great, there's holes that could be fixed and or filled in. I just didn't really believe true love here. I believe the dwarves love her.
Yeah.
In this case, is it dwarfs or dwarves? It's dwarfs with an F, right? Because
yes.
I think Tolkien says one. Tolkien
yes.
says with a V.
Correct. And dwarfs is considered the correct spelling with the F. It looks wrong to me. I feel like it should be with the V, but yeah, you're right. That comes from Tolkien.
But I totally believe the dwarf's love story. When she is in that coffin and they're all sad and Dopey's so upset. And even the mean one, what's his name? What's the
Grumpy.
What's Jerky? Grumpy. He's sad too. And it's very believable because they realize, this was the greatest thing that ever happened to us, is this woman who was in our life for a couple of days. I think the live action, I'm not sure how successful it will be. This film is not talked about as much with little kids today. She is one of the Disney princesses, but yeah. I think girls still know. I'm saying this as a pediatrician and like the toys and shirts they bring in. They're definitely still into Cinderella and what's it called? Tangled. Yeah, that really
Rapunzel.
made Rapunzel really, really popular. And then, of course, there's the modern princesses that they like too. But Snow White's not as well known. So it'll be interesting if they're able to bring her back in the zeitgeist. So for me, yes, the movie stands the test of time.
Because you mentioned the songs, this isn't just the first animated feature film or like the first cell animated feature film. This is also the first movie that had a soundtrack album. That was not a thing that existed before this movie. Now, especially a Disney movie, a musical, you think, of course, it's going to have a soundtrack, but that was considered like a weird thing. Why would you release a soundtrack with your movie? What? But, Walt Disney knew what he was doing. Also, the new version apparently only features 2 songs from the original, Heigh-ho, Heigh-ho, and Whistle While You Work. It does not include Someday My Prince Will Come, maybe to your point, because it's, an old-fashioned kind of thing about the man rescuing the woman. But it is interesting that Someday My Prince Will Come turned into this jazz standard. Dave Brubeck and Herbie Hancock, I think Miles Davis did it too. It just became a thing that the greats of jazz did for whatever reason. I don't know why. John Coltrane did it too. And also listen to the jazz versions, then there's no problematic lyrics because it's just the beautiful melody. But that's going to do it for us this week. Join us next week as we talk about The French Connection. We lost Gene Hackman not that long ago, and I feel like I have just been reading about that movie in particular over and over again. There's like a famous car chase in it that I've seen, but I don't think I've ever seen the whole thing. Have you ever seen that, James?
I think I might have seen it. This is where his name is Popeye.
Yes. Well, I'm excited to watch that movie. We can pay our respects to the late, great Gene Hackman. In the meantime, we want to hear from you. We are at Tested Time Pod on Facebook, X, Instagram, and Threads. Write to us. Let us know about your favorite dwarf. Are you more of a happy or a dopey or a bashful kind of fan? Let us know what you think about the old days of Disney princesses. We love hearing from you. And we'll see you next time, everybody.
Bye.